State. When we started, to give you a sense of how big the challenge was, when we started, we did not even know how big the issue was. We didn't know how many untested kits were sitting on shelves. That was unknown when we started this process. We did not know where they all were. We had to clear the backlog while at the same time making sure it did not grow. Even as we were trying to solve it and test them, of course, unfortunately, more sexual assault kits are being created that need to be tested. It was not a small task, but by working together, we've been able to honor the courage of the survivors who submitted to what is most assuredly a very invasive process to gather this important evidence for law enforcement. We also instituted critical reforms. To give you just one example, 9 years ago, testing a sexual assault kit took months, if it was done at all. Today, all kits are tested within 45 days. We accomplished this by working together. Everyone played a role: legislators, survivors, the Department of Justice, who provided multiple grants to my office that essentially helped us fund this operation out of my office so we could put together a team to work on this. The State Patrol Crime Lab, local law enforcement, SAFE task force members. The last thing I want to say is to be very clear that all of us recognize that our work is certainly not done. While we have cleared the backlog, and that is a very, very important step, of course we need to make sure that we stay on top of this, that we're vigilant, that we continue to honor victims, that we continue to make sure we have a process that respects what they've gone through and make sure that we're delivering justice for them and for the people of the state of Washington. So with that, I'm really excited to turn this over to Representative Orwall, who has been, you can have no better partner in general at the state legislature than Tina, and certainly no better partner on this issue. She's just been, you know, a force of nature on this all the way through, and really, Tina, I mean, so much of the credit, it's shared amongst many, but obviously a lot goes to you and your leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those kind words, and you've been an incredible partner from day one. You know, we're here to talk about a very dark history in our state, which was thousands of untested sexual assault kits. You know, each of those kits was a survivor whose voice was never heard, that never had a pathway to justice. And we're here to close that chapter. And what I would say to the survivors is, we're so sorry the system failed you, but we've also created a system to make sure that never happens again in Washington State. And it took a team. And I'm going to walk a little bit through the history of what happened in our state. Really, we had a light shine on this in 2015, and I think three things happened. I know the Joyful Heart Foundation was looking at this issue of untested kids throughout our country, and we had very brave survivors like Leah Griffin here today, really challenging of what was happening on her sexual assault kit. I toured evidence rooms, and I saw these white boxes stacked to the ceiling, discovered they were sexual assault kits. Most had never been tested. Very sad day. And then we also had just an incredible amount of work done by the media to really shine a light on this issue. And you really have helped us through the whole process. And I do want to do a shout out to Linda Byron, who probably was one of the first journalists that really did an in-depth stories on this issue. And so we discovered this, and so in 2015, we introduced a bill to require the testing of all kids. We also created the SAFE Task Force, and many of the members are here today. I do want to do a shout out to Representative Mossbrucker. She has been my partner since day one on this work in the House. I also want to acknowledge Senator Monica Dingra, who's here today, as well as Senator Rivers. It's been an incredible team, and it's been staffed and supported through the Attorney General's office. So after we did the requirement to test the kits, we had a lot more work to be done. And one of the first things we implemented was a statewide tracking system. It was one of the first in the nation. And we knew that was going to be a tremendous amount of work. And thankfully, our Attorney General, who has stood by us from day one, and his staff went after the Psaki grant. This was a national grant that really brought in resources to help us inventory and make sure all of the kids were entered into the system in collaboration with law enforcement and the Washington State Patrol. And that's when we really discovered that the thousands were, up to and close to 10,000. And so that was a very daunting time, and it was really so many people working so hard to make sure no one was left behind. We also went on to do really important work around trauma-informed training, and I know we're here by the commission who does that work. We do trauma-informed training with law enforcement to change that culture that our Attorney General mentioned. We did last year to include prosecutors to be part of it. Because yes, we want every kid tested, but we want a path to justice, and we want to take dangerous predators off of our streets. And so we really think these next steps are going to include seeing if we can't prosecute more of these cases. I also want to note that we did a Survivor Bill of Rights, really trying to understand and how do you create a trauma-informed process where survivors feel heard and supported. You start by believing. And I think you'll hear from Leah Griffin, who was a critical person on really helping us create those, and we continue to work on those. One of the things that I think is really going to make sure this never happens again is our high throughput lab in Vancouver. I want to thank our Washington State Patrol. We did a visit to London, Ohio, where we looked at the labs and we tried to understand what were the best practices we could bring to our state. And it was really, we came back to Washington and we worked with the Washington State Patrol and the governor's office to see what did the legislature need to do and invest to make that lab possible. And of course, it opened in Vancouver. The staff have been incredible, and they are meeting that 45-day period of time. So I just want to reiterate that I'm really proud of the work we've done. It's been an incredible team, and it's been led by survivors, and I'm really proud of that because survivors understand what's broken and how to fix it. I think we have more work ahead. I'm working with the Attorney General looking at sexual assault on our college campuses, and I think there's an incredible amount of work to be done in that area as well in our K-12 system. So I want to thank everyone here today. I want to thank law enforcement for really helping us with these dangerous predators and investigating these cases. And again, for survivors, I just want to say we're sorry we failed you, and we're working hard to make sure that never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Orwell. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for thank you for inviting us here. We are, on behalf of Chief Batiste and the entire Washington State Patrol, we're very honored to be here today with people who really have made a tremendous difference. The people behind me and to my left and right have gotten up every day for the last many years working on these issues and these challenges, and we've done it. We've done something that just a few years ago didn't seem like we could do. It seemed like an intractable problem that would always be there. And for your listeners and your viewers, for our friends in the media, one of the messages that we want to deliver is that when we come together, whether it's from the left side of the political spectrum or the right, whether it's whatever group it is, when we come together and we work together, we can accomplish great things. And those who may feel, who've kind of bought into the narrative that government can't get anything done, it's too top-heavy, there's too much bureaucracy, there's too much distraction. When government focuses on a problem, when government focuses on the people it serves, it can get things done. And today we're celebrating is a tough word when you're talking about such a sensitive topic and some tragic situations. But the Attorney General used the word historic. We're recognizing the historic nature of what's happened today. So we're happy to say that the backlog has been effectively eliminated. There are still some cases and some testing that still needs to be done, and final analysis and reports being done. But all of the historical kits that had sat and languished on those shelves for all the years, as the representative mentioned, they've all been tested there. We've cleared those decks. We're getting there. The other thing I'd say is that what an honor it is to come together with the Attorney General read the list of the people that are behind me and the people involved in this. You have prosecutors' offices, you have WASPIC, you have sheriffs, police chiefs, you have victims advocacy groups, You have people who, again, they wake up every morning and they decide to make the world a better place, and this is the way they've done it. Perhaps most importantly, and the Attorney General mentioned this, our work is not done. Just because we cleared the history away doesn't mean that there's not a current situation and future challenges. Every single month this year, our lab has seen, on average, 121 new cases that have come in, new sexual assault kits that needed to be tested, tests that needed to be analyzed, that analysis needed to be compared to other testing so that we could have an ironclad, fact-based, solution-based approach to going after these folks. I wish I could tell you that there weren't dangerous people out there who do deplorable things, but sadly there are dangerous people in our society who do deplorable things. And the Washington State Patrol, along with all of our partners here, are absolutely committed to doing all we can to find them, to catch them, to prosecute them, to exonerate them when they've been accused unjustly. But we're there to find out the truth, get to it, and to honor the survivors and the victims so that the indignities of the delays of the past will never be repeated again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leah Griffin, and I was raped in 2014. And I struggled to find, first, a hospital that would provide a sexual assault kit. And once I went through with the kit, I struggled to convince law enforcement to test my sexual assault kit. I reached out to every lawmaker in the state of Washington, and the people that you see behind me are the ones who responded. It took 14 months to test my kit, which was the average amount of time that it used to take in order to just start the investigative process. And through the work of this organization and these people, we know that every kit's going to be tested, that the survivors who came forward to collect that evidence matters. What I want to say to the survivors out there is that what happened to you was not your fault, that this backlog was not your fault. You were not uncooperative. You were working in a system that was not designed for you. Which was why I'm so proud of the group of people here who are redesigning that system so that what happened to me and what happened to the over 10,000 other survivors who tried to access justice never happens to a single survivor in Washington State ever again. One thing that I really want to talk about too is that the Me Too movement was a big deal for the culture caring about this issue. But Bob Ferguson and Tina Orwell and Manka Dhingra cared about this issue before the rest of the culture did. And that's why we're here today, is that these leaders, before society had a mandate to do this, said, this is important to me, and this is important to our society and our state, and we did it. So I want to thank especially Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Tina Orwell, Gina Mossbrucker, Senator Dhingra, the lawmakers who have prioritized survivors and worked with survivors to make these changes. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. And the last thing I want to say before opening up to questions was, on behalf of all of us, Leah, right? I mean, there's been a lot of partners on this thing, as we know. People played an important role, but, honestly, your voice, you putting a face to the issue, right? Which,
It's tough.
I can only imagine, right? And so being willing to put a face to it, my gosh, right? I mean, that is, that takes a lot. It takes a lot to put your face on any issue, right? Let's, if you're a person out there somewhere in the state, right? But, especially tough for this one. And, it's, so you and the other survivors, who were willing to speak, but you especially, I mean, you've really obviously been there from the very beginning. And, I think Leah just always kept pushing on it, right? She just always kept pushing on it in the best way, right? In the best way, is always kept pushing on it. So I've heard her speak about this issue a number of times, and once in your home, I think, actually. And, and that's, that persistence, right, is a big, big reason why, without that persistence, we're not here, I think is maybe the best way to put it. So thank you. So with that, we're happy to take questions. I'll do my best to, for those on the phone, I think we have some on the phone, I think. So I'll do my best to try and repeat the question that we're hearing in the room, and then we'll do our best to answer it. Yes?
This might be a question for Chris Loftus, talking about the technology in the
repeating that question? Just thank you, Chris.
The question is, does our new throughput lab in Vancouver have the capacity to continue on this journey and to make sure that we're able to keep up with the need out there from across the state? And the answer is yes. It's not just a high throughput lab in Vancouver. We actually have 8 different laboratory facilities across the state, and several of them work on these types of cases or similar DNA type of cases. But the high throughput is where the focus is and where the lion's share of it. We're committed to doing the things that we have to do, which is to keep up with the need. And as I mentioned before, I wish the need wasn't there, and I wish the need wasn't growing. But as our population grows, the need will grow. That means we've got to increase the capacity in advance of the need rather than after the need, as we did here in the last few years. We can't afford to play catch up. It's just not fair to the citizenry. It's not fair to the survivors. That means we need to make sure that we have the resources to hire new forensic scientists. We need to have the resources to purchase and to calibrate and to use new robotics and other advanced technologies, and we need the physical place. And as for some of you, I've actually been to Vancouver with some of you before and toured the facility. Eventually we'll need more than that. But for now, we're where we need to be. Our capacity is in advance of the need.
Are you still getting in about 2,000 new kits every year?
Well, it's about 121 has been the average in 2023, but that varies, and some years it's been as high as 2,000. And you have to remember that not every DNA case is a sexual assault case, so we get thousands more of DNA cases that are for homicides or for other types of investigations. That also is worked on at the Vancouver lab.
I wanted to ask, just what are the key differences compared to 10 years ago to today that we're here talking about the backlog cleared? What are the key differences that have resulted in that?
More. We've got more people. We've got more space. We've got more technology. We have better processes. The Attorney General mentioned the tracking process. We have more people attending to these things. And unfortunately, we have more challenges. We have more kits. We have more people in the state. We have more need for it. So there's always going to be an advance of need, and there has to be an advance of capacity to stay in front of that need.
In the funding we're supposed to get at that, I know that there was lots of funding, work going on in Olympia, but do you have a figure? What it takes?
I don't have the exact figure. Tina, I bet you the representative does.
Do you mind repeating the question, Tina?
Yeah, I know the question was the funding it took. And, we increased the funding, I think, over a 4-year period. And then we did a huge investment at the time for the high throughput lab. And I don't know, Chris, would you say that we've doubled the number of staff working at the Washington, more than doubled. So, I think we realized we had really underfunded and under-resourced our lab. And so, yes, we doubled that. And fortunately, there was space in the Vancouver lab where we gave rehab dollars to turn that into the lab. But I can send you the numbers. I have them all broken down of how many staff per year for 5 years of investments we made in the legislature.
And I'll add to that, it's also the technology. We have invested in robotics that allow some of the more mundane physical things that have to be done in the testing, moving the vials from place to place, all those sorts of things. That can now be done 24/7. Whereas before we had that sort of technology, that had to be done by human hands, and that had to be done in 8-hour shifts, and people had to go home, they had to go to sleep. The robotic technology allows us to really maximize. That's been the force magnifier.
Yes, sorry.
I think a report that was released about this process mentioned that there are still some kits that may not have been handed in, and that none of the officers involved really feel that they have the authority to compel those kits to be handed in. Do you have a sense of what might still be out there that has not been tested or given over to the State Patrol, whether it's in police departments or hospitals or what have you?
So the question is, I'll try and paraphrase. I think it went to, that are there still untested kits that are in the hands of local law enforcement that have not been submitted? So I'm not sure if someone, do you know the answer? Tina's going to answer that.
Well, there's different categories. One category is the hospitals have been holding kits where the survivor did not want them submitted. I think those got moved to law enforcement to be held. We wanted to hold them for 30 years in case that survivor changed their minds. As far as specific, the bill does require all kids to be tested, so that's within the law. I haven't heard what jurisdictions have not submitted, but that would be important to know.
Yeah, and I don't believe, I'll check with my team, but I'm not aware. Our understanding is, with the exception that Representative Orwell mentioned, the kits have been submitted. I mean, obviously each day, right, things can be happening, right, but essentially the kits have been submitted.
And if I could just one more, just under 2 years ago, there was still 6,000 kids that needed to be tested. What was it that kind of kicked this into overdrive that let you do that capacity within such a short period?
Great question, so I'll just repeat it, and then I think it looks like Chris may take a first shot. So the question was, hey, maybe as recently as 2 to 3 years ago, there were still about 6,000 untested kits. What might have been the main reason or key reasons that we were able to get so many tested in a relatively short period of time? Chris is going to go first. Sure.
One of our main strategies in this endeavor has been to outsource the older kits to other labs across the country. There were, as you might imagine, this type of expertise is fairly limited and very demanding. We found 3 other commercial labs that we were able to outsource thousands of the older kits so that they could be doing the main testing, then send the test results back to us, and then our forensic scientists could analyze those tests, review those tests, cross-match things, and make sure it was correct so that we could have a viable court case. COVID had a tremendous impact on not just our operations, but those 3 labs as well. Not only were their employees, and again, this is a sliver of a sliver of a sliver of science as far as expertise. And so there are just not that many people who have the abilities to do this type of testing at the level that it needs to be done in the entire nation. But as their employees were impacted by COVID, then all of their supply lines, from everything from test tubes to microscopes to the people who transport these things in a very secure fashion, as you might imagine. So COVID had a significant impact all across the board and really slowed the outsourcing and the progress that we were making pre-COVID in that. But as COVID as the pandemic has, I don't think it will ever end, but as it has lifted, as those impacting factors have lessened, we've really been able to expedite things, and the system has gotten going, and you see significant movement just in the last 2 years, as you asked.
The only thing I'll add to that, I think that covers it pretty thoroughly, but we've been at this for a lot of years, obviously, but we weren't even starting from a standing start, right? As I think I mentioned in my comments at the beginning, we didn't even know how big the problem was. We didn't really have a sense of scale, honestly. I mean, it was, so it just, there was a lot of time being spent, time as in years, right? Being spent to try and find funding, trying to figure out how big the backlog was, trying to set up a system, trying to get all partners on board. I mean, you can imagine a lot of time was spent there. Just as I think we're starting to hit our stride to get it going, COVID hit, which was clearly a key factor. But I think there, if you've seen the bell curve, the work had been done, the change in culture had taken place, the infrastructure was there, all those things had come together coming out of COVID. Then I think all those together combined to really jumpstart things in a very significant way. Other questions here?
You
Yes.
talked about the 20 arrests and successful prosecutions. Were there any serial predators in those numbers?
So the question is, of the 20 arrests and convictions, are there any serial predators in those? I will have to defer to my team. I believe that there was at least some folks that had more than one victim, but I'd want to check with the team to make sure, and we can get that for you, Natalie, afterwards to make sure. Yeah, I don't want to get that wrong. Anybody on the phone have any questions? And if you do, if you don't mind just introducing yourself first, and then I'll try and repeat your question for folks in the room. So if you're on the line and have a question, please go ahead.
Hi, Grace Dunn with the Washington State Standard. I was wondering, Leah mentioned that she struggled to find a hospital with a sexual assault kit. And this question is for Representative Orwell or any other state lawmakers in the room. I'm wondering whether the state or the legislature has done any work to ensure that hospitals have sexual assault kits, to ensure that all hospitals have those resources and are able to do that kind of work.
Thank you for the question around the work we've done to make sure that hospitals have SANE or forensic nurses available. And I do want to, again, note that my colleague, Representative Gina Mossbrucker, really has done a lot of work in this area, looking at different things around, I think our emergency departments have to approach a survivor, have to, within a certain number of hours, let them know what's available, and if it's not available there, have them go to, or instruct them on other locations. We've done a lot around SANE training. This is an area, though, I think that needs a lot more work. And I'm just going to, even as we're looking at the college campuses, and I think what happened last year with the in-home sexual assault kits, which again we banned thanks to our Attorney General and Representative Mossbrucker, is that we need to create a system that's more easily accessible for survivors at that point in time. And so we are looking at some models, starting maybe at our college campuses, that could be more supportive and more available to survivors.
Does anyone else on the phone, on the line, have a question? If not, final thoughts here? Then maybe just a final, I think everybody here is available for you. If you have one-on-one questions, I think everybody's available. Thanks to everybody for being here and for all the work. I think, Tina, you expressed it well, that it's, it's mixed emotions, obviously, right, for this gathering, right? I think you mentioned closing a dark chapter, I think, which is certainly true, but also a feeling of accomplishment, right, for having addressed that head on. And so, there are many things I appreciate about this process, and everybody worked on it, but I think, there was a certain level of, I think I used the word persistence for Leah, right? I think there was at some point, I remember having the feeling that, everybody's rowing the same direction here, right? That we're just, I felt for a while like, are we ever going to get our arms around it? I do remember some years ago feeling like, okay, it's going to get solved. It may take a while. It's sort of hard to see the end game. But I think everybody just sort of dove into it and stuck with it. And that is so important for an issue like this. And so I think the last thing I just want to say is to thank Leah again, really on behalf of everybody here. Yep. And, what you did was really tough. But truly, for those out there, so you can't make a difference, right? In our society, you're looking at someone who did, right? That she just, wasn't going to take no for an answer, right? And by that persistence and putting a face on it, I can't emphasize enough. I often say a guy in a suit can only get so far in communicating to the public, right? That you need to have people who have a story who's impacted by whatever it is that's going wrong. Right? To communicate that, right? That is a necessary part of this, to put it very mildly. And so, thank you for being willing to do that. Thanks for being here and covering this, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Oh. Yeah, let's do it.
Recording stopped.
Yeah, Dan, maybe we take a quick, while we have everybody here, let's take a quick picture, and then they can chat with folks. Yeah. Stay